How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Good, 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 good. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Very
And
excited to chat.
yeah, I'm glad that Wes is making it all happen. So that's awesome.
I know he's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I want to congratulate you on the new album, The New World Blues.
thank you. Right on. Thanks.
Yeah, it charted on number 3, which is great. And
Hmm.
from start to finish, I have to say, impeccable.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm really. I'm happy it came out. I'm not like totally surprised that it came out well because Tab Benoit produced it and everything. But
Yeah.
I'm definitely very very happy about it. So.
Well, with your talent and his talent together, you can't expect anything less, right?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, I think it's great because recently I've been kind of diving into the blues a little more and
Okay.
realizing that my favorite classic rock bands were inspired by the blues. And
Right. That's kind of where I come from on all that stuff. I consider myself more aligned with blues rock and classic rock, but
yeah.
the blues is such a huge part of all that music, and that's really kind of what got me into it. Was like, how did Zeppelin come up with this, or how did whoever. I grew up a hard rock kid, so like it just kind of all trickled back down, and I ended up going just back in history to like, oh, that's where it all kind of came from. So
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm doing, just going down the rabbit hole and seeing who inspired who borrowed what from
yeah,
who.
it doesn't. And let me tell you, like I've been going down the rabbit hole for I don't know, like 30 something years at this point, and it just doesn't end.
I know, yeah. It's like
Doesn't end.
have to find the origins,
Yeah, exactly.
300 years back.
Yeah, it just keeps going.
Yeah, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the songs on the album.
Okay, great.
Starting with Back at the Poorhouse, that's, such a fun song. And I feel like that would be a great one to see live.
Yeah, I've always loved instrumental music, and a lot of my favorite guitar players have instrumentals on their songs. Like Freddie King would do whole records of instrumentals, and Steve Ray Vaughan would do instrumentals. And I'm also got into a lot of Jeff Beck and Eric
Yeah.
Johnson and guys
Oh,
that
yeah.
that have instrumental music and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of that one is sort of a lot of people say that it reminds them of kind of a Stevie Ray Vaughan thing, and I think that's probably because of the way the guitar sounds and that it's like a shuffle. But yeah, I love instrumental music and trying to come up with a way to communicate something without actually having to sing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I named that song after there's a venue in the Bay Area in California. It's called the Poorhouse that my band has played a bunch of times whenever we go up to the San Jose, San Francisco area, and it's kind of become like our home base up there. And so I kind of wanted to acknowledge that in a song, because it's like when you name an instrumental, like sometimes the name doesn't necessarily like present itself to you. And we were playing there one time, and that's actually one song that was kind of already a song before we made this record. And so I was just like, because we played it there before it really even had a name. And so I was like, that'd be a perfect name for that, Back at the Poorhouse.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I always wonder, when I listen to instrumentals, like, how did they get the name for the song?
Yeah,
That's
it could be
fun.
anything.
Yeah, and then another song, Lies in Fear. It's funky, it has like a funk to it, but then once that guitar solo hits, it's full of emotion. It's very
Yeah.
captivating.
Yeah, that I wanted when I was writing for this record, I knew that because Tab and Corey, were very familiar with New Orleans grooves and maybe some funkier grooves that I'd explored in the past with my music, that I wanted to have some things that were different for me groove wise and gave them an opportunity to really kind of put their spice or their flavor on some of these songs. And I'd also at that time when I was writing for the record, I'd played with a guy named Sugar Ray Rayford for a year, who's like an blues, R&B, funk, soul artist. And so I learned a bunch of his songs to go tour with him. And so that was kind of also like part of the influence of having been playing a lot of funky music for the last, I think at that point it was probably like 5 or 6 months I'd been touring with Sugar Ray Rayford. That music had kind of rubbed off on me when I was writing for this record. So it kind of worked out that way, that there's some things on this album that are a little bit more kind of, I guess you could say, funky or groove oriented than
Yeah.
anything that I'd done in the past. Yeah.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure, having new styles to play, that must be, interesting and keeps
Yeah.
music fresh for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, at this stage of the game, I want to challenge myself and do things. I mean, obviously, everything I'm going to do is going to be based in some sort of blues rock thing because that's just kind of where my comfort zone is. But I want to get outside and experiment with some different feels and some different, grooves and songwriting, ways of writing songs and some chord progressions and stuff because it keeps it more interesting and it keeps things more exciting for sure.
Really cool. And so, I mean, you've played live, a bunch with so many amazing artists. And it's hard to say when live music will begin again, but is there a favorite venue that you love to play that you can't
Uh,
wait to go back to?
Well, I mean, I already talked about about the
Like the
poorhouse.
poorhouse.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's one that when my band, I live in Southern California, and that's in Northern California, so that's one. I'm looking forward to going back to the Blues Bender, which is a festival in Las Vegas that I've been at for most of the last 6 years or so. That's in September, and that's a great kind of multi-day festival that happens there. I mean, honestly, I'm just looking forward to playing,
Yeah, right.
a gig. I did a streaming show with my band, a few months ago, and that was a lot of fun. But that also just kind of got me in that mode of like, oh man, I totally love how this, we hadn't played for a while. We rehearsed, we did this streaming show, and it just reminded me like, oh yeah, that's right. I do this, and this is a lot of fun.
No, I can't wait to see live music again. And I feel like
Yeah,
it's been ages.
indeed.
What do you think of these young guitarists that are kind of keeping blues alive, like Toby Lee? I don't know if you've seen him before. He's like a British
Yeah,
kid.
yeah. Well, there's always seems to be like some kid coming up that plays really well. And I always, I mean, I have two thoughts about it, honestly. One is like that's impressive because when I was that age, I don't even know if I was even thinking about guitar or, I was probably still trying to learn how to ride a bike. And so I think just from an execution point and just from like a learning point that someone's able to get the physical coordination that's involved with playing guitar and stuff like that. When you say the word blues, it's an interesting thing because blues in and of itself as an art form, is born out of struggle, and born out of having lived a certain amount of life. It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily like have had some crazy suffering life per se, but there's an aspect of a lot of this music that is felt regardless of technique and
Like raw
regardless of that.
emotion.
Yeah, and just the emotion and what you're conveying. So I mean, I think it's amazing, and I hope that these kids stick with it, and that they're able to, whatever, bring joy and love to people. My thing that I, sometimes say is just like, wait till that kid gets his heart broken half a dozen
Oh
times.
yeah. Then,
You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like wait till that happens. And then then you'll probably hear something like that's going to really hit you here. Cause right now it's just kind of like, well, that's really impressive
it's more
that kid
like
can do that.
technique than
Yeah, and
feeling.
it's amazing, and I wish I had the technique that a lot of these kids have because I never got there, but I'm anxious to hear what's going to happen in 10 years when they get their, like I said, they get their heart broken a few times. It's like, all right, that now you got something that you can write about.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to ask you, because I heard you talk about you're a vinyl fan. What would you say are like the top three essential albums
Oof.
someone should have on vinyl?
Well, are we talking from like a blues rock fan point of view, or
Right,
just
yeah.
okay, because that's a
I
big
know there's so
task to
many out there.
assign. I mean, I can tell you what records really meant a lot to me that got me into blues and blues rock, and I think that as a guitar player, I'm just going to keep narrowing your question down till like so I feel like I can go, okay, here's three. I think that if you're going to have a conversation about blues or blues rock, that you need to talk about BB King,
Oh yeah.
first and foremost, because he really is the guy that took the electric guitar to that place. I mean, there was obviously people before him, acoustic players and some electric players, but I mean, as far as the electric guitar goes in this genre, that's the guy that you know, that I think everyone needs to listen to. And the record of his that it's almost like a stereotypical cliche thing to say at this point because this record's been cited so many times, but there's a record called Live at the Regal. That's a live BB King album. And it's flawless. It's just, you know, it's just the most amazing thing. And that was one of the records that turned me on to all of this music. A friend of my dad's loaned me a stack of records when I was in high school, and I was aware of blues, and I was into, you know, certain things that were blues based, like Zeppelin or Cream or, you know, and that stuff. But I started out and I was into Iron Maiden was like my first favorite band, and Def Leppard. I mean, I was all into the new wave of British heavy metal was like my stuff when I was a kid. Van Halen, of course, being, you know, from Southern California. But so when I got into blues, so anyhow, I'm taking a long way around the barn. BB King Live at the Regal would be one. BB King Live at the Regal would be one. I think for me as like a blues rock player, that conversation also has to include the Allman Brothers Band, because they took a lot of different music as well. And one of those same records that I was loaned when I was a kid was Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore East. And that's a double album. So hopefully that counts as one. So I'm kind of like working the system a little bit here. So I'm going to pick a double album. So BB King Live at the Regal, Allman Brothers at the Fillmore East. Third record. Wow. You'd think I'd like have this just like, you know,
It's
down.
tough.
It is tough. I don't, you know, there's so many great records and so many blues records and stuff like that. You know, one guy that kind of bridged, you know, the gap between, you know, the early blues and what's kind of become blues rock, I think, that was important to me was Stevie Ray Vaughan. And that's a hard one to pick. As far as vinyl goes, I'm trying, I mean, I've got all my records are actually like right here, like in front of me. Most of them, and there's some back there. My office is a mess. I just got back from a trip producing another band. So everything, like I got CDs over in the corner and guitars laying around. But I would say, you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan made a bunch of, all of his records, I think, you know, are killer. My favorite of his was his last studio album that he did, In Step. But if we're talking vinyl that I own, I would say Couldn't Stand the Weather, you know, because he was a really important person in the evolution of blues and guitar, for better and for worse. I mean, he kind of did inspire a lot of guys who just, you know, went after what he was doing and kind of just ripped off his style and didn't dig any deeper. But for people that were really paying attention, he was really that kind of guiding light that would talk about his influences in interviews. So while I, for a little while, when I got into him, was trying to kind of play like him, at a certain point, I was like, well, I'm just going to, what is he saying in interviews? And he talk about Hubert Sumlin, and he talk about Albert Collins, and he talk about Buddy Guy and BB King and Lonnie Mack and all the Albert King, of course, and Jimi Hendrix. So he was really kind of that guy that if you were listening to what he was really saying, not only as a guitar player, but as a person, he was saying, go check out where this music comes from. And to me, you know, blues rock, if it's doing its job, like to me as a blues rock artist, you know, I feel like I'm doing my job if people ask me a question like that, like, where does this stuff come from? Where do you get this? And it's like, it's these founding fathers, it's Black Americans, it's BB King, it's Albert King, it's Muddy Waters. It's these guys that really suffered for their art to give us this music. And I think that's Stevie Ray Vaughan was that guy, at least for my generation. I'm sure there was, you know, guys for other people, for, you know, older people, and maybe there is someone now for younger people that really, you said, I'm glad you love what I'm doing, but this is where I got it, you know, and that's really important.
Yeah, that's great that he, you know, isn't taking credit for his music.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, now I have like 3 records that I'll have to go shop for.
There you go. Yeah, no, you know, get them, or you know, or order the CD if you want. I mean, I have a bunch of CDs too, and I, you know, I download, you know, stuff from iTunes, and I actually do use streaming stuff, but I typically only do that if I'm too lazy to put on a record or pull out a CD. I've already paid for it.
The good thing about Boston is there's still record shops that exist, you know.
Oh yeah, so you're in Boston?
I am, yeah.
Okay, I lived in Boston for 2 years.
Oh really?
Yeah, I went to the Berklee College of Music
Yeah,
in 90 to 92. So yeah, I am well aware of what happens between November and March with the weather, and
yeah.
Man, oh
cold.
man.
Yeah, I'm thinking of getting out eventually, so I don't
Yeah,
have to suffer through the cold anymore.
gets pretty cold.
I want to ask you, is there anything else that people should be on the lookout for in the next coming weeks?
Well, actually, I mean, keep an eye on all my stuff. We got some cool things coming up that I don't know if I can actually say yet, but if you're on my Facebook and my Instagram, which is easy to find. I mean, my website is myname.com, which is alastairgreene.com. And if you don't want to try and spell my name, which a lot of people don't, you can just go to agsongs.com, same landing place. So yeah, we've got some new things coming up. There are dates that are being talked about as far as gigs go, and that could be sooner than we think, or it could be longer than we think. It really just kind of depends on what happens over the next month or two. And yeah, so I mean, I'm planning on releasing some new music and hopefully playing some shows, and my band and I are looking forward to maybe doing another streaming thing coming up. And in addition to that, I'm just blathering at this point now, but you asked.
Yeah,
I'm producing a band right now from Bakersfield, California, named Orphan John, and I just got done producing his record, and we're mixing it. And actually, at the last moment, his guitar player left, so I ended up playing guitar on this album kind of last minute, and I'm really and it worked out really well, and whatnot. So that's coming out in addition to that. And yeah, I'm just like everybody else that's a musician, you're trying to just keep your name out there and keep being creative and creating music and putting things out and staying connected with your fans and your friends and whatnot. So yeah, just find me on Facebook, Instagram, my website, and YouTube, and all that, and stay connected and come along for the ride.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to, see you and your band live.
Yes.
Whether it's in Boston or somewhere warmer.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate that. And I take it you're a big Queen fan by the posters back there.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right on. Right on.
Okay.
Yeah, I can dig it. Cool.